This is a book review of A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood, published by Vintage Books. Paperback edition, 152 pages. The synopsis I'll leave on my blog and get straight into the book review. This book review was chosen by my local library reading group, and I enjoyed it, but for vastly all the wrong reasons. I never hate a book. I think I wouldn't be honest if I read a book and said, oh, I hate it, because I don't look at a book in a fanciful way, because I think it's always trying to convey or say something, as the book usually has a message and that sense of communication of some kind, even though it irks me. It's usually one that I can get a perverse sense of enjoyment out of its contents, as to be unforgettable, at least not justifiably engaging with it, even if it's a tempered hostility, which for me is the best to read. It brings out your passion-filled reading like nothing else. I get a lot more to say about it than what I usually intend to, and you can't really say that of a good book without a risk of being shortchanged emotionally, to be bereft. I'll start off by saying that this book, A Single Man, is plain speaking, and is a short novel, and it's contemporary of a postmodernism era in its contents. I'll also say that the book cover illustration I didn't feel right was for the content, as George himself was in his 50s, yet only saw the shadows of himself when he was young, when he looked into the mirror or was visiting a gym for a workout. Therefore, I felt this cover jacket was misleading to the reader, thinking it was that George was a young man going through this type of passage of his life, and it didn't match the publisher being vintage either. And I didn't really take to the character George in this book, as he made me feel that I was questioning his personal motives all the time because of his behaviour, not his intellect, and that intention of his was never revealed whatsoever. He was very singular indeed, which is the phrase of what you see is what you get, but wasn't necessarily in any particular order of his own character. Basically, you could never figure him out. His whole being was that of personality as a shapeshifter, and I think he knew it, hence his mood swings, which were all over the place. And the author set this right for the book, I think, for the main character to hold the story together for such a novellola. I sense that the author didn't want anyone to get close to the bone in examining George's character, only that of one's expectation of him to express himself suitably enough where we could identify with him, and that's all. But I won't oblige that. I'll examine him anyway. Because I think what I ended up with feeling about him was that of his patriotic hypocrisy within the book, between what the character George slides from and to so easily. He has some form of Americanism, colonial as well as the material era of when this book was first written. Then he slides to the British nostalgia and the parental patronising attitude. And then he slides to loathing Europe. But then he's very quick to quote Greek god mythology to a student. And I just felt that it was all superficial elitism to impress other people. Beguiling with his sense of own importance of how he came across to other people. And I also felt that the minuted details of his lifestyle, another Americanism, was very symbolic. But I didn't feel it was progressive in any way. It didn't set any trends, but rather enforced or compressed them to the reader, upon the reader. It shouted whether or not you like this is the George, George's actions, and George's lifestyle. And that's all the snippet that you got of him. It was very surreal, which I think George might have liked, me thinking that way. It's not a book where once you finished it, you come out with a feel-good, happy fact of the US Californian sunshine as a cliché. No, you're more likely to come out from reading this book piqued and baffled by the experience, due to his cynicism with life in general. On purpose, perhaps, no doubt. I'll explain more of that on my blog, because I've only got so much that I can say on this video. What I didn't like much was the pop culture aspects of the book. For what the hell is Sarah Lawrence trained? I mean, that's what the writer writes of a female character on page 68. And that's never explained. I'm not American. I am not for the East Coast. I hadn't a clue, to be honest. And it seems when you read it that you are supposed to know of it as you're reading it, as it implies that. But you aren't if you're in England or in Europe. Again, this is where, as I said, that sort of hypocrisy, patrioticness comes out from, because he doesn't like the East Coast, it seems, by the way he's written of it. And I had to go and look it up on the internet, and if the internet didn't exist, I still would be in the dark about what the hell is he talking about. But it turns out it's a private woman's college campus in the state of New York, which the irony is lost on you. You're thinking, well, the contents of the way George spits it out, it's like it's even wrong to even think that it's a nice one. It's a nice place to be educated in, and especially since it's been established since 1926, which has the motto "Wisdom is understanding." And I just think, in George's part, it's just purely reverse snobbery, as you get the feeling that he doesn't like a certain class of woman or female, and prefers the dominance of being male to subdue them to his whimsical sort of notation that they still had to please him in some way, even though he's homosexual. The social contrary to believe thought that's not lost on me, however, because he has an unease to all what he portrays to be all-conquering attitude that he manifests whenever he's with a woman, and sometimes with young men as well, but more so with women. And what got to me near the end was the way regarding his grief. Some of I could understand, but in other instances I felt within the book, how could he? I mean, how could he? For in the process of moving on with his life, for George it meant replacing someone he apparently was supposed to care of deeply with another just like him, but most probably a younger version. And for some reason this really rubbed me up the wrong way. I felt he was being disloyal in not moving on in the correct way. I just felt he replacing someone. I don't think you could ever replace someone, and he wasn't willing to go with someone who was completely different in character. He wanted someone just like his lover, Jim was, and I just felt, you haven't really moved on at all, have you? And once I finished the book, I do apologise for those who are sensitive towards the sentimentality of death, but I thought, glad he never got the chance. Hence, for me anyway, it was a very apt title, excuse the pun, as he remained George single throughout the whole book. So glad. What I felt when I finished the book was that George, being overhyped, that self-entitlement, overhypeness, had been playing some kind of parlour game with the reader, as he was doing with the female character Charlotte when he was drunk. And when he was sober, he most probably wouldn't remember anything. But you would, as he most probably hoped you would remind him of it, hence the book, when he was long gone. Because was it really the George that you thought it was, or another George? And it left a sort of aftertaste of a hangover. And I'm wondering where my ice pack is for my forehead at the moment. But yes, it's a book worth reading. Thank you for listening.